Meine Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen zu diesem Nachhaltigkeitsgespräch mit zwei extrem spannenden Panelisten. Wir machen das auf Englisch und ich freue mich schon sehr auf beide. Let me introduce the panelists to you. There's Kate Brandt, the head of sustainability for all of Google, with whom we're very happy to talk. Kate, welcome to our discussion.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And there's Rüdiger Recknagel, the sustainability head of AUDI and the head of the AUDI Sustainability Foundation. The same warm welcome to you, Rüdiger.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Now, we want to structure this conversation a tiny bit. I would, first of all, ask Kate about her experiences, successes, goals, and maybe also things that didn't go so well. Do the same with Rüdiger, and then try to bring those two representatives of very different industries together, thinking about what they can do together and where maybe they're even opponents. All right, so let me start with Kate. Kate has an interesting past in that after studying international relations, she early on worked for the Obama, I think, first campaign and then administration as the leading sustainability officer. And then due to a certain Republican president, I guess she went on to Google. Kate, what would you say? Where can you do more for the environment and against climate change, at Google or in Washington?
Yes, well, as you point out, I've had the great privilege of working on these critical issues of climate change and sustainability, both in the public and private sectors. And in my role in the Obama administration, I had the chance to lead sustainability for the US federal government, which is the single largest user of energy in the world. So obviously a huge opportunity to drive impact, to lead by example, and also to use the power of federal procurement to also drive new behaviors within the private sector. So I was very privileged to do that work. But the way that I found myself at Google is I've always been a huge believer in the role of technology in enabling everyone to drive impact and to tackle these very, very complex global challenges that we face. And so, I've been thrilled to be at Google now for going on 6 years. And for me, I see so much potential in our technology, whether that's the work we're doing to enable cities to do climate action planning, how we're enabling people who use our products every day, billions of people around the world, to make more sustainable choices. So, I'm a huge believer in the power of public-private partnership, but I'm thrilled about the impact I'm able to have here at Google.
Great. That was the kind of diplomatic answer that I would have expected. Google seems to be in a certain transition when it comes to climate change, because obviously IT also has adverse climate effects, and because it uses so much energy. But you say that you're going from offsetting these climate effects to actually not creating them anymore. Can you explain a little bit about this transition to us?
So yeah, when we talk about our work at Google on the topic of climate change, this is something that we have not arrived at recently. We have been focused on this truly since our founding. And so when we go back, in time, the first major commitment that we made was in 2007, we became the first major company to achieve carbon neutrality. And we've done that every year since. Then in 2012, we set a new goal for ourselves that at the time was extremely ambitious, which is that we wanted to match 100% of our electricity use with renewable energy. And we achieved that in 2017. And we did that by, on an annual basis, procuring as much new wind and solar power as we consumed across our operations. And so that's led us to have about 50 wind and solar projects that we're purchasing from for a total of about $4 billion between now and 2034. So that's where we've been. But as you point out, we never like to rest on our laurels here at Google. And so now where we are, as we think of as our third decade of climate action, and we've set what we see as truly a moonshot goal for ourselves. This is on par with work we do on things like self-driving cars or even quantum computing. So our new goal is that we want to operate on carbon-free energy by 2030, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as you point out, this is a new model. This is not what we would think of as sort of emit and compensate. This is what we're working towards of an absolute zero, where we're never emitting carbon from the electricity used in our operations in the first place. And so, I think carbon neutrality is an important step. It's an important opportunity to enable avoided emissions. So that's where we've been. Same with renewable energy procurement. That's also a critical piece of the puzzle. But with 24/7, to get to that absolute zero, we have to look beyond renewable energy. We have to look to policy change. We need to bring new technologies into the fold and also new contractual structures so we can do things like pair clean energy with storage. So that's the journey we've been on that we're really excited about.
Of course, everybody who's on the way to climate neutrality is looking for renewable energy. So is Audi probably with its cars and every other car maker on the planet. So is Google. But it could also be that this demand which you're creating is going to drive up prices for renewable energy, and also is going to drive other users away. So what do you do not only to consume only this type of energy, but actually reduce your energy intake?
Absolutely. So, I think like any sustainability strategy should, we've always begun with energy efficiency as our focus. And, our strategy around carbon neutrality has always been threefold: use as little energy as possible, 100% renewable energy procurement, and then lastly, take care of whatever is left with high quality carbon offsets. So on energy efficiency, we have been at this since we started building data centers over a decade ago, and it's how we design the systems in the data center. It's how we design our servers and our compute. And where we find ourselves today is we operate some of the most efficient data centers in the world. They use about 50% less energy than a typical enterprise data center. And compared to 5 years ago, we're getting about 7 times more compute for the same amount of electricity. And one of the really interesting and innovative things that we've done that's helped us to get there is utilize machine learning. Google has been deploying AI and machine learning across lots of challenges and to make our tools even better for our users. But we've also been, as we say, dog fooding it on ourselves. Eat your own dog food. We like to try things out on ourselves. And so our team at DeepMind, in partnership with our Google Cloud colleagues, have developed an AI-powered efficiency recommendation system. So they took all this data from the data centers, from sensors, power, temperature, pump speeds, and through that, we're able to drive an additional 30% energy efficiency in the cooling system in the data center, which is where a lot of the electricity goes. So we were able to do that for ourselves. We've been rolling this out across our fleet, and now we want to make it available to other major industrial partners. So later this year, we'll be launching this for other data center operators, for large building operators, so they can do the same thing to use machine learning to drive that deep efficiency.
And is that going to be a big business for you, or rather a help that you roll out without any profits in mind?
So this will be an offering that we will sell to our cloud customers. So it will be a part of the broader offerings that we have within our cloud portfolio. So hopefully this is a great opportunity to align a double bottom line of both doing good and providing a great service.
I remember when Google was very young, I think the first or second year, and it was in a bit of a bind because didn't have enough data processing power. Larry Page went so far as even to take out the on and off button out of your servers in order to save space and energy and make them more efficient. What are tricks that you are using? What are things that others could copy and that you found very intriguing?
Yeah, one thing that we've been doing that I think is really exciting is something that we call carbon intelligent compute. And so what we find is that, in our data centers, there's lots of, we think of as jobs, there's lots of work happening in the background in the data center. And much of it doesn't need to happen immediately. It could happen at some point over the course of the day, for example. And so with carbon intelligent compute, we're actually able to shift when certain tasks take place to times when the grid is cleaner. And so we're able to shift in time. So we're able to sort of adjust when we do things. And then we're just soon going to be sharing more news about how we're thinking about shifting in space as well. So the ability to actually go to different data centers. So that's a topic that I'm really excited about, an area we've been making a lot of progress, and we're going to be making a little bit of news about that later today, actually.
Even Google and Alphabet cannot do everything by themselves. Who are your major partners in pursuing all these things?
Yes, I'm so glad you bring up the topic of partnership, because I think that it is absolutely critical. You know, we feel very strongly that these are systems level challenges, and they most certainly will require partnership to tackle. And so we have been particularly focused on partnerships in the space of renewable energy procurement, because as you point out, for us, it's not just about Google checking a box, meeting our ambitious goals. We want to drive systems level change. We want to enable other corporations to do what we're doing. And we ultimately just want to drive the grid to zero, to carbon free. So in the US, we have helped to establish an organization called REBA, the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance. There's over 200 renewable energy buyers that are corporates that have committed together to purchase about 60 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2025. So that's been a huge push for us here in the US. And then similarly, several years ago, we helped to launch the Resource Platform, which is a coalition based in Europe, similarly focused on renewable energy buyers. How do we come together to break down barriers to create greater access to clean energy? And also in Europe, we're working through RE100, which is, again, another business coalition. So we've found that it's really valuable to come together to advocate and to drive the greening of grids with other companies.
There is, of course, in the whole of the sustainability debate, there is the question whether the world can actually do its economic things without a growing intake of material, whether we can be so efficient that the materials we need are going to go down in numbers instead of up. And the same, of course, is a question with digitization. On one hand, you're becoming more and more efficient. On the other hand, digitization becomes more and more omnipresent and also more energy intense. I mean, look at Bitcoin, for example. Look at the cryptocurrencies, which need more and more energy by system. Are there certain things in the digital world that we have to do without, that we have to regulate? Where do you think the dangers lie?
Yeah, I think this is such an important topic. And I have to say, I think as people's awareness of this topic has been growing, there's also, unfortunately, a lot of bad information out there. You know, we've seen figures in the media that are saying, you know, the emissions associated with IT are 30 to 60%, you know, what we actually know them to be. And so, I always like to kind of come back to the facts. What we know is that data centers today do about 6.5 times more work than they did a decade ago with the same amount of energy consumption. So data centers still account for only about 1% of global electricity consumption, the same as they did in 2010. So I think it's just sort of important to level set on that. But also to the conversation we've been having, absolutely, we need to continue to drive on deep energy efficiency. And then ultimately, we need to get the grid to carbon free. So we believe very strongly that, yes, efficiency of ICT is actually very strong. It's been something that not only Google has been committed to, but there's been a lot of commitment across the sector. And we need to get the grid to carbon free, absolutely. So it's two sides of the coin, I think.
Rüdiger, may I switch to you and start by asking when the production of Audi cars is going to be carbon neutral?
So we have our strategy Mission Zero. We call it Mission Zero. We developed it 2 years ago, and there we have a clear goal. Our clear goal is to be CO2 neutral in 2025 in all our production plants. That means all over the world, in Mexico, in here, in Hungary, and we have a clear plan how to achieve this. We are many steps that we went before, and we started very early with this program. Our program started in 2012. We started with carbon neutral energy in our plant here in Ingolstadt, where we had green electricity. But what is important for me is that we have a clear hierarchy of measures. That means we start, Katie said it before, we start with energy efficiency, with energy reduction. And we have a network about all our production plants and the environmental officers, they meet every week. Every week we have meetings, then we have database. Also, as you say we exchange ideas, and we do a lot of energy efficiency first. That means, for example, last year, we could save more than 10,000 tons of CO2 with energy efficiency. We also save money, more than 6 million euros per year. And that's our first step. We started with our first CO2 neutral factory in 2018 in Brussels. If you know, our first electric car, the e-tron, is produced in Brussels. And there we started to be CO2 neutral in 2018. And the first step, energy efficiency, as I said. Then the second step is energy generation, clean energy generation. As you know, we have many PV on our roofs. We have large roofs. And for example, then in our plant in Győr, in Hungary, last year we started the biggest PV, the biggest PV installation on roof of about 160,000 square meters, 36,000 solar cells, and that's where we produce green energy. That's the second step. We also produce green energy for warmth, for heat. Heating is also important. Everybody only tells about green electricity, but we also need green heating. That's what we, for example, are doing in Győr in Hungary. Also, we have geothermy. More than 80% of our energy, of our heating energy, comes from geothermy in Győr. And then the third step is purchasing green energy, like Kate also said. That's what we are doing. Hydropower, as I said before, in Ingolstadt since 2012. More than 100,000 tons of CO2 we avoid like this every year. And then the last step is the offsetting. Last step is only less than 5% in our factories. For example, in Brussels, where we are CO2 neutral, it's less than 5%. It's for gasoline, using gasoline stations. And that's where we use offsetting. And there we prefer local projects. We try to find more projects, something like this. Not so forests in far countries. It's pushing away the responsibility. And that's only something that we try to avoid if it's possible.
Okay. Rüdiger, I was told ahead of time that you know all the numbers, basically. So maybe you can tell us a little bit of the relative weights of actually reducing the energy in the production process, and maybe also the materials used in the production process on one hand, and switching to renewable energy on the other.
Yes, so first, now you know the car industry is changing. We are in a big transformation process. That means we are going electric. AUDI has also announced, as others, as the VW group, that we are going electric. We are producing our first electric models, the e-tron GT. We will double our electric models next year. Then we will have, I think in 2030, we will have a third of our cars electric models. So we are going strong transformation in electric cars. And as you may know, the battery of electric cars has a big CO2 impact. And that's why we force our suppliers to deliver us CO2 neutral batteries. So that's the first step. And if you were to talk about numbers, so it's important that the batteries, they come CO2 neutral. And that's what we are doing with our suppliers in our supply chain. We have more than 16,000 suppliers at AUDI. And we make questions. We have a sustainable rating with them, and we are in our factories. We are the blueprint. We have CO2 neutral plants. We will have all plants CO2 neutral in 2025, as I said before. And now we make sustainability ratings with our suppliers that they also go CO2 neutral, like Kate says it. And I can say I'm impressive, and it's striking what you tell about Google. And it encourages me that we can perhaps change the world, and that we can go CO2 neutral in all the industry, and we have to do this. not only in the industry, but also in building industry. We just talked before about John Schellenhuber, who's going also build in the building industry, but we have to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. You already touched on this issue, which I want to ask about. The producing an e-car and the material for an e-car seems to be at first sight more ecologically unfriendly than producing a classic car.
Yes.
Is that going to be a systematic problem, or do you think that this is going to be solved in the sense that soon enough this is not going to be the case anymore?
No, I think it's not going to be the case anymore, because our suppliers, they have to produce their batteries CO2 neutral. If they use the same measures like we do, then you don't have this amount of CO2 in your cars, in the production of your cars. Mm. And another thing that's important for me is I'm convinced that I'm an engineer, and I'm convinced that only technology can bring us forward. So I'm also the head of the AUDI Environmental Foundation. And in the AUDI Environmental Foundation, we do a lot of research, and we do also a lot of green innovation. We call it green innovation, green innovation. That's what AUDI stands for, Vorsprung durch Technik. So advance in good technologies. That's what we need to save the world and to prevent the world before climate change and for really serious and dangerous matters that will happen if we don't go on and if we don't use technology.
So let's try and bring you guys together, which means bringing the IT/service industry together with the classical producing and production industry. Kate, what can you teach these guys, and what can these car guys teach you?
Yes, I think I love having the opportunity to meet peers in other companies, because at the end of the day, we're trying to tackle so many of the same challenges. And, one thing that we have a longstanding practice of at Google is not only do we do things like produce our annual environmental report, but we really like to put out technical white papers and other case studies of the work that we've done, because we think it's so important to do that sharing, to talk about what we've learned, how we're thinking about the methodology for new things like this 24/7 carbon-free energy journey that we're on. So I think a big part of it is that sharing, and also coming together in groups like I mentioned, Vari 100 or REBA, and having the chance to think about where is the intersection point, right? I think there's a theme here of technology optimism, about the opportunity that we have to utilize technology. So I'm really excited to continue that conversation, whether that's what we can offer through Google Cloud. I talked about how we're going to be bringing forward new machine learning solutions for optimizing energy efficiency, other ways that our technology can be brought to this industry to help them continue on this journey towards carbon-free.
And Rüdiger, may I ask you, are you more afraid of Silicon Valley, which after all brought you Tesla, which after all also brings you Google, in the sense of being sort of one master of digital technology, which you need in your cars, or are you more happy to cooperate with them?
No, I'm an environmental protection guy. I'm happy if environmental protection goes on. So I'm not afraid at all. I think we have to work together. I think we can learn a lot about digitalization. Now we need autonomous driving. There we can learn from each other. Also, if we make energy, if we want to reduce energy consumption, if we use artificial intelligence for energy reduction, energy efficiency, there we can learn together. And I think, if I may say this, Kate can learn from us. She has to drive electric cars, not only Tesla, but only perhaps an e-tron, and driving electric cars and loading, recharging with solar energy or with wind power energy and things like this. That's what they can learn from us. Okay, how they can help also to improve our world and to reduce CO2.
Okay, and soon enough, now Kate is going to sell you on Google Maps as the primary intake in your cars and everything. I can see where this goes. So let me get away from this and ask you, Kate, first of all, since also you've been on the political side of things, what CO2 price can we have when without destroying industry?
Yeah, so I think the way that I think about this issue is that, policy measures can help us to internalize the externality that is carbon, and that plays an important role in driving towards a carbon-free economy. And so, when I look at the EU, the ETS, it provides a strong framework for valuing carbon emissions in Europe. And then when you combine that, with the recent increase in emissions reduction targets that we've seen in the lead up to COP26 later this year, I think it puts, the ambition in Europe on very strong footing. And at Google, the way we thought about this is we support policy measures that help put us on the path to a 1.5 degree C world. That's what science has told us we need to do. And again, where we really particularly focused is on carbon-free energy and on policy enablement to get the grid to zero. So that's how we've thought about it.
And where do you then, sorry if I try to be specific on this point, where would you then land with the CO2 price? When are we going to have the $200 that we need for a carbon neutrality path?
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see where policy goes on this. There isn't one global standard right now, but I know we've seen the Biden administration taking this up. We see Europe looking at it. So, again, I think internalizing the price of carbon is going to be a critical piece of this puzzle. And, I think we'll wait and see where policy gets us. But for us, we've been very focused on how do we get the grid to carbon free, and also the role of our technology in enabling everyone to do it.
Rüdiger, maybe I can also ask you, in Germany, it's a very specific, also brought up by Fridays for Future debate. Where do you see the carbon price going when? And what carbon price can AUDI actually live with?
Yes, I think the price is too low just now. That's my personal opinion. And I think we also need a higher carbon price, also to improve and to reinforce measures that people do more in this area, and that the industry is also forced to say a price which AUDI can live with. I can say, but we think that the double of the actual price will double in the next 3 or 4 years. And I think this is a good price, which also the industry can live with.
Kate may know this or may not know this. She certainly doesn't know by experience because she is so young. But with the first red-green government in Germany in 1998 began the German ecology tax, which was mainly on gasoline, but also on other things, and which was meant to rise every year. So until you had a carbon price that was much higher than it is today, actually. And after a couple of years, I think it was 3 years, the then chancellor from the Social Democrats stopped it because public media, popular media and lobbies were so outraged at price hikes that he thought he couldn't maintain this anymore. What's different today? Why do we think that this is not going to happen again? Rüdiger, maybe you can start. Okay, please.
Oh, no, please, by all means.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think to me it's so exciting to see the level of focus right now on climate change in corporations. I think both of our companies are great examples of this, setting very bold long-term commitments on climate. I think there's truly a race to the top happening right now in the corporate sector and in policy. I think we're having a watershed moment around policy related to climate action. And I think it's also in individuals. I think in Germany and across Europe, you all have in many ways been ahead of other countries in terms of, I think, commitment and awareness on these issues. But I think average people now truly believe that we have to do something about climate change. So to me, I believe we've sort of reached a point of no return. I don't see us being able to turn the clock back anymore. I think between the level of commitment across the public and private sector, we have reached a point of no return. So that's my hope anyway, but I think the signals are clear to me.
Rüdiger is nodding.
Yes, I agree with her that the time has changed. People now recognize that there's a point of no return, that there are tipping points, like John Schellnhuber always says, that we have to do something now, that we can continue like this. And I see it in my department. There are so many people that want to work for me. Yes, in the company, people are coming, just in the AUDI Environmental Foundation, where we do a lot of things to emphasize people, to make people sensible for environmental things. And people come to me and they say they want to help, even in their, if not in their working time, they say, we want to work for you, we want to help you. We make actions, we are planting trees, we are doing blogging, we are collecting trash and jogging, things like this. And people, the mind has changed now, and there's the point of no return. And I'm convinced, and it's right, that it will go on. And there climate change is visible now. You see it, everybody can see it. And so everybody sees that it's really serious. The Fridays for Future. If you see the politics now, the success of the green politics in our country, perhaps we will have a chancellor, a green chancellor. All things that play in my cards, that come to me because people are more interested in environmental protection, and I think the things will go on. And perhaps I'd like to mention one other thing, that research is very important. For example, the forestation, the trees. We in our environmental foundation, we started planting trees in 2009, 12 years ago, for research. Because of research, we have a project with the Technical University of Munich. In 2009, we planted oaks in all our production plants, in Mexico, in Italy, in Hungary. And now we just 1 hour before, I had a discussion with our professor, with a professor from the Technical University of Munich, and they are very happy because now they have the first scientific results how to plant trees in the future. And now, if I tell this in my company today, there are many people interested. And 10 years ago, everybody said, "What are you doing? It's not interesting for a car industry to plant trees and to make scientific research." And that shows me that the world is changing, and I'm very hopeful that people will now react, and will not only with laws and with prices, but also with intrinsic motivation and fight for climate change, like do this the Fridays for Future. I sympathize very much with them, and I say it's a good thing. Even if I'm in the car industry, it's important for our world that our people, young people, that go on the street and then that fight for climate change.
Well, Fridays for Future would probably not return the favor to 100%, but rather say you have to be quicker than you are right now. I know. And you know this debate and dialogue. Kate, in America, you also have a John Schellnhuber. His name is Jim Hansen, and the long-time sustainability head of and climate head of the NASA. And he, at a certain point, said, "I'm now going to try to activate the young generation because they're my last hope to really affect policies against climate change." And you, of course, have the young generation working for you at Google. What do these young employees bring in terms of impact? Also, are they outraged at times at what Google does? Do they drive you forward, or do they just take whatever comes?
I think that we at Google, one of our greatest strengths on our work on sustainability has always been our employee base. You know, we're so fortunate that we have two founders in Larry and Sergey, who both personally have always cared about this and put it, you know, at the center of our core values. And our employees, back to some of our earliest employees all the way up through today, have also cared deeply about this issue. And that has been such a strength for us. You know, at Google, we have something called 20% projects, where basically an employee can, you know, work with their manager to say, "Hey, I want to spend roughly 20% of my time working on something else where I think I can really drive impact." And some of our most interesting work has come out of these 20% projects. So I talked a little bit a moment ago about the work we've done around using machine learning to drive deep energy efficiency in our data centers, and how we're going to make that available to others. That work started as a 20% project. One of my colleagues, Jim Gao, he was a young data center engineer, and he said, I really think there's something here. I want to go work on this. And this has now turned into something that we're working on across the company and building products around. Same thing with my colleague, Carl Elkind. He lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he wanted to put solar on his roof at home, and he couldn't figure out if there was enough sun on his roof. And he thought, you know what, I bet Google Earth has all the information I need to answer this question, not just for me, but for everyone. The tool Project Sunroof was born, and now people around the world can type in their address to Project Sunroof and get information on the solar potential of their rooftop, and make it much easier for people to put solar on their roofs. So our employees have been critical to our work. Historically, they will remain so.
That's sort of the creative side. Have they also protested something? Have they avoid something or changed something on the systematic level?
Yeah, I mean, we in general at Google have a very open culture, and I think on sustainability, that has very much been our approach. So I hold regular office hours. We like to hear from people on what they're thinking. And I think getting that feedback has been critical, whether it's on issues like how we reduce food waste in our cafes, or how we continue to push ourselves beyond 100% renewable energy to a carbon-free world. You know, we hear from our employees on lots of topics, and I really value their input, and I think they push us to continue to set bold goals, and we really, you know, appreciate that dialogue.
Since Fridays for Future is not at our table today, at other side tables all the time, but it's not here today, let me try and challenge you a tiny bit on this. This technology innovation message that you're spreading is something I share. At the same time, it probably cannot be everything. There have to be things that the consumer society at large has to not do in the future, has to avoid, has to give up. What has to be given up? Maybe I start with Rüdiger on that one.
First thing what I would like to reduce is flying. So we also make this call here. I speak here with the US, and I don't have to fly to the US. Last time, I think some weeks, some years ago, it wasn't thinkable that we do so much home office. Even if I'm in the company for 4 days a week, I only live 2 kilometers away here from the production plant, so it's allowed for me. But reducing traveling, it's the first time that we have to. The first thing I think we have to avoid. The second thing that we have to avoid is producing so much meat, and to be aware of our land use is a big thing. It's also a project that we are doing. We are making a remediation project also from AUDI side, and so the land consumption is the next thing that have to be regulated. There are also laws that will come, and yes, the third, meat, flying. Yes, something other things. These are the most important things that I can think about. Perhaps Kate, you may, and then I can add something else.
Yeah.
It doesn't come as a surprise that Rüdiger did not mention driving, but rather flying. But Kate,
driving electric is okay.
Kate, what would you say?
Yes, you know, I think this is a really important debate. Is a more sustainable world about giving things up, or is it just about thinking differently, you know, and about really pushing, you know, as consumers, pushing companies to take on more circular models, to take on a commitment to carbon free. So, I think the suggestions you've made have a lot of merit. But I also wonder about, how do we give people better information? Like that's a lot of what we've been focused on at Google. So when it comes to flying, in Google Flights, we're now showing in several European markets the carbon footprint of flights. So people have that information so they can make a choice, so they can factor that into their decision. Or on sustainable transportation, whether people want to drive an EV and make sure they know where their EV charging infrastructure is, or if they say, hey, actually, I want to take a bike share and I want to know that the bike is going to be in the stall when I get there. This is the kind of information that we can give people to give them choice. And I think my hope is that ultimately the sustainable choice is also the better choice, that we don't have to give something up, that instead we're giving people a better solution.
And that maybe the understanding of what's true welfare is going to change, right? And true wealth. Yes, that would be wonderful. If let me put it this way: Germany doesn't have Greta, but it has a Greta. Her name is Luisa, and who's an extremely smart activist. And she would say, well, this whole technological change and demand-driven change, which you just mentioned, and innovation-driven sort of saving of the world is fine, but it's not going to be fast enough. And the problem is that by stressing this so much, and by the industry stressing this so much, we are not doing what we have to do politically. They are seen as substitutes, political rules and innovation, whereas they should go together, because one cannot really manage the 1.5 or even 2 degree goal, which you mentioned, Kate, without the other. What do you think about that?
I think we absolutely need both. And, I think we were talking about this a moment ago. I think it's critical that there is action in the public and private sectors, that business is doing its part, that policymakers are doing their part, and as individuals that we are, thinking differently about how we live our lives and using, voting with our feet and voting with our pocketbooks too. So I think it absolutely requires everyone. This is the decisive decade. We don't have time to sit on the sidelines. We all need to be involved. And I truly believe that we're reaching this point of no return, that this demand is going to drive us. And I totally agree with the point around it. We are seeing the impacts of climate change in our daily lives. I know last summer here where I live in California, the wildfires were so bad, I could not take my newborn outside. We know people around the world have been dealing with drought, have been dealing with flood. This is very real now. So I think it takes everyone. I think we have to move faster, and that's going to require action across society.
Rüdiger?
I also agree. We have to move faster, and every bit counts. Everybody can do something. That's also what we are trying to do in our foundation. Everybody can take part, and only if it's a small light that you don't make on, or your PV on your roof, or things that you can change, less traveling, things like this. Everybody can do a little thing, and we need both. We need the rules, we need the political regulations, but we also need to emphasize people to doing, to reacting, to acting, and to do good things for the environment. That's why, and I'm fighting for both. I'm the environmental officer of AUDI. I'm also responsible for compliance. So I also have, I need the rules. We have the rules that we have, that we keep the laws, that we in our paint shop, that we reduce energy of what is written from the law. But we also need the intrinsic motivation from everybody. That's also my conviction. And I work in both directions, and both are very important.
All right, you're both great ambassadors of sustainability at your companies. No doubt about this. Let me ask you, as human beings, sometimes on a positive ending note, sometimes we detect these little ecological miracles in our lives, things that we hadn't expected were possible, innovations that we didn't think could exist, or little insights. And maybe I can start with Kate asking.
Oh, Well, I mean, I think I would say a couple things. We were talking about trees and restoration a moment ago. I have been also really passionate about that topic. I'm very fortunate that I get to live in a very old growth redwood grove here in California. So I'm very passionate about the role of trees in this equation. And we've been working recently with Tom Crowther at Crowther Labs and the Restore platform to bring information to the global restoration movement about how we plant trees, what is the right tree planted in the right place to enable much more sequestration. So I've been very passionate about the role of restoration and you know, having this personal appreciation for trees in my backyard, but also the role of technology in enabling us not just to preserve our old growth forests, but to really drive on much better restoration globally. So that's an area of personal passion for me. And also, you know, I'm also very interested in, we've talked a little bit about the circular economy. How do we design waste out of our systems? And, you know, I was saying, I think part of it is about different business models. So I really like what Loop is doing. They're a company that are partnering with a lot of big consumer brands to provide refillable packaging. So I'm really excited about that potential. I think they're going to be coming to my area soon, but I know people have been using them in Paris and New York to have beautiful reusable packaging for all those things we use in our daily lives. So those are two things that I've been excited about lately.
Rüdiger.
So for me, I just this day, if you ask, the last was 2 hours ago when the professor from the Technical University, he thanked us. He said, you are supporting us now since 12 years for our research in the forest that we planted in 2009. And he said, normally he don't get money because you need a quick success. And now we have a new compact, or we said we will give you money the next 10 years. And he was very happy because he said normally it's boring what we are doing. Nobody is interested how trees are growing in the next 10 years, and you give us money to do research in this area. That's something that makes me very hopeful, which has also perhaps a bigger impact. And we see that mixing trees, not only monocultures, are better, and he can make research how biodiversity is different and how things happen. And that's one thing. And one very, very small thing, it was 3 weeks ago when I came on Monday in my office, there was an email, and someone wrote me that there was a bed that they found here in Ingolstadt, and they wanted to bring it in a home in near Wolfsburg in Braunschweig. And so they called me and said, can't you help? There are many people that are driving from Ingolstadt to Wolfsburg because we are part of the Volkswagen group. And he said, can you take this bed in this special hospital in Braunschweig? And that's a very small thing, and you can save the world, not energy, but things that people think at me, and that I can help also a small animal to come in a hospital in Braunschweig like a bed. It's something, perhaps it's funny, and it's not saving the world, but every bit counts. Is my personal opinion.
Right. Let me say that I'm currently in love with a northern German entrepreneur who has about the age of Joe Biden, and has developed and is trying to bring to the market windmills, energy windmills that are 3 times as high and much lighter than current windmills, because obviously the wind energy up there is much better. And he does that with the energy of a 20-year-old green tech entrepreneur. So I think there are miracles everywhere, so let's hope that put together they indeed are enough to save the world. It was a pleasure listening to your optimism, to your realism, and also to your answers to a little more challenging questions. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Rüdiger, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.